Greetings. This is Top Hat and Buttered Popcorn. My name is John Savers. I'm your host. Today we'll take a look at a couple of films, beginning with Kung Fu Panda. This is a film directed by a duo, Mark Osborne and John Stevenson. It's an animated sort of film, and as such we have voices for the characters, and the lead voice is Jack Black's for Po the panda, the protagonist in this film. Also providing voices, Dustin Hoffman, Ian McShane, Angelina Jolie, and a variety of others. The film looked good. I liked it myself. It had a bit of the modern Disney quality to it. That is, it retained a certain bit of the warmth of the old Disney films, animated films. It also contained some of the same capacity for satiric points. It also had certain qualities of a spoof on the martial arts as well as a homage. And the thing was filled with a sort of modern quipping that should be familiar to most moviegoers from television, sitcoms, etc. A lot of it is what might be put down as sort of wisecracking, smarty-mouth kind of commentary and so forth. But at any rate, it all packaged pretty well, I thought. Now, the film has a kind of a prologue, a preamble to it. I thought it was pretty cool myself, and a very good lead-in. And in this we see a sort of stylized vignette of a mysterious martial arts hero able to vanquish all opposition. Well, of course, this is sort of the dream vision of most young boys of being the conquering hero. And this is pretty much what it is. We see this as the spoof element quintessential, and also the homage, and it just calls to mind the whole genre from the children of the Shaw brothers in Hong Kong, I suppose beginning with Bruce Lee's breakthrough films into America, and the many thereafter. So it was pretty well done, I thought. Now the film body gets going when we realize that this preamble, this prologue, is a dream of Po the panda. Now, if you look at Po the panda, he's a rather chubby fellow. He's a youngster who's, well, obese. And in the way, he seems to be almost a statement, or rather a surrogate, I would say, of the problem kid in America today from the point of view of authorities who continually hack away at overweight youth, youth not in good shape, and so forth, which many of you are familiar with. Po seems to have this problem. He clearly has a desire to be a kung fu master. Throughout his little room, he has posters and statuary of kung fu heroes and scenes and so forth. He is what might be called a kung fu wannabe. He would love to be a kung fu master. It appears that nature gave him the body to be a sumo wrestler, however, but he is not pulled in that direction. We see him kind of being called by his pa. His father is a goose named Mr. Ping, who runs a noodle soup shop, and he is very encouraging toward his son Po in this regard to take up the practice. When he quizzes his son about what he was dreaming, what was taking so long, what was happening, Po makes up a story about a noodle dream. This goes over very well with his father. He said this is the quintessential element before one becomes a noodle master. Son, you've broken through, you're initiated, as it were, into the brotherhood of the noodle soup makers. It's a curious relationship. At one point in this film, by the way, it looks as if there's going to be a kind of a heart-to-heart revelation by the father in regard to the son that would lead the curious viewer to suppose that he's about to tell his son that perhaps he was adopted, a foundling or something of the sort. But then he, in point of fact, relates that there is, in point of fact, no secret to his secret soup element. At any rate, there is the marketing ploy by Mr. Ping in regard to his noodle soup, that a mystery element exists, and even his son at that point in time, and at the first part of this program as it gets going, believes absolutely that his father has a secret ingredient. This kind of situation somewhat calls to mind the Wizard of Oz situation in which we find the Tin Man and the Lion and the Straw Man, all presented with symbolic elements that made them think that they were now able to do what they could always do from the very outset if they just tried. Anyway, we do see Po and his father in this sort of domestic situation. They seem to have a good father-son relationship. There's kind of a shot in this film as they work their way outdoors where you see situated high up on a sort of mountain, a temple. And within this temple is the master of martial arts, Mr. Shifu, a red panda who looks somewhat like Yoda and actually behaves a little bit like Yoda, I think, also. But he has a team of adepts known as the Fierce Five, who also lurk about that temple, including the Tigress, whose voice is supplied by Jolie. There's also a monkey. It looks like a gibbon, but they call it a monkey. A mantis, praying mantis. A serpent, a viper, I suppose. And there's also a crane. These are the fierce five and denote styles of martial art. And we get some look at them in action. They do seem to be rather stalwart. Now, this temple overlooks something called the Valley of Peace. This seems curious if you think of China's history and also their diet. It seems like maybe it would have been better to name it the Valley of Peas. But at any rate, be that as it may, it's called the Valley of Peace. Now, there is a legend involved with this Valley of Peace, and there is a legend, I believe, with a threat element and with a hero element, the hero being the Dragon Master. At one time, the master of the temple, as opposed to the master of the martial arts training, Mr. Oogway, a wise and ancient turtle, he is to choose a new dragon master from amongst the population who will protect the Valley of Peace. Now, the danger comes from one Tai Lung, who was an adept, a foundling, and a great martial arts creature, like a son to Shifu. And unfortunately, there was a character flaw in Tai Lung. This was sensed by Oogway, and Oogway refused to anoint Tai Lung as the Dragon Master. Infuriated, Tai Lung promised to bring a cursed vengeance upon the Valley of Peace for this disappointing event. It is one which was almost accomplished. Only Oogway himself could bring the fierce Tai Lung down to a position of quiescence sufficiently long for them to imprison him in what might be called the dungeon, Tootie dungeon, right out of hell almost, a kind of dungeon presided over by brutal rhinos. At any rate, he is there in a dire condition. He's really locked up. It's for those of you who remember the Man in the Iron Mask, Tai Lung is even worse off. He's worse off than Hannibal Lecter at his most confined moment. He's really in bad shape here. But his spirits are not daunted. He's filled with hate and rage if he can only get out. Now, Oogway has sensed that he is going to get out. He is sort of clairvoyant, something of a seer. He is very concerned about this situation and tells Shifu and his other people there at the temple that the dungeon, the prison, has to be warned, double the guards, double the precautions to keep Tai Lung imprisoned. A messenger is sent after a sort of bird, crane of some sort, I think, at any rate, to tell the head, the commandant of the prison, double your forces, double your precautions, and so forth. which, when it happens, is met with a certain bit of patronizing by the commandant. He has a pretty tough place, and nobody's going to get out, he's pretty sure. However, a feather from this bird happens to flutter down into the vicinity of Tai Lung, and apparently with that feather he is able to pick his lock, so to speak, his harness or whatever the contraption is. There's a rather extended and fairly exciting depiction of his escaping from this facility. But we're getting a little ahead of the game here, because before this actually occurs, Oogway has gathered together those who will strive to see who will be the next Dragon Master. All the villagers in the Valley of Peace want to see this, and Fu the Panda also wants to see this too. His father, seeing an opportunity to make a little money also, encourages him to take a cart full of noodle soup to sell to the fans. It's curious at looking at the denizens of the valley. They seem to be almost exclusively made up of pigs, rabbits, and cranes. It makes for a rather limited but interesting group, and it suggests to me something of a Chinese menu in the making. But at any rate, they do make their way up the many steps of the to the temple crest, where the striving will be demonstrated. Plenty of seats for fans. Poe is a latecomer. First of all, he's not in good shape. He has a very hard time negotiating the steps. He has that cart and so forth. He's getting nowhere fast. Finally, he abandons the ship and tries to go just without, and even that, it's a great struggle. He finally makes the crest, and just about that time, they've shut the gate. So he's locked out. He tries to figure out some way to get in. He tries to look through peepholes. He finally finds some fireworks. He puts them, attaches them to a chair, and basically creates a spaceship, so to speak, a prototype, lights it, and it's a dud, apparently. Meanwhile, his father has come upon the scene and is dithering about and so forth about his son's doings and whatnot, and suddenly it takes off. And there's a whole lot of fireworks and stuff like that, and he goes up high in the air and explodes, and the charred chair and the somewhat charred Poe come falling down and crash right in the center of the arena. And while his head is spinning a little bit and he's trying to get himself together, his eyes come focused on the crooked finger of Oogway pointing right at him. He has been declared the new Dragon Master, has been anointed by Oogway as the new Dragon Master. Say what? Well, this doesn't sit well with Shifu at all, nor with the Fierce Five. You can't be serious. Shifu tries to bring forth arguments against this selection. Think it over, Oogway. But Oogway is not to be defeated in argument because he does not make logical decisions here. Deductive reasoning is not really what he's about. He is a man of faith and intuition. And he feels that this is an invisible hand's choice that he cannot turn his back on. Po is the dragon master. Now, Shifu must turn him into a martial arts master so that the hidden hand's direction and the Shifu direction become one. Shifu says, how am I going to do this? You know, this guy is Klutzville. He's big, fat, non-athletic, you know, there's no way. But you have to have faith, according to Oogway. And so the first night or so, the first few days, Shifu tries to discourage Po from becoming a martial arts hero, becoming the dragon master. They want to get him to voluntarily go AWOL, actually. But he won't do it. And finally, Shifu goes again to Oogway and says he won't leave, he can't learn, he's never going to make it, we're all going to die, Tai Lung is going to destroy the whole place, and this sort of deal. Oogway tells him, you have to believe, you have to have faith. If you believe, you can cause your belief to manifest itself in Po as the dragon master. Who is Shifu to argue with Oogway the wise, who almost right before his eyes dissolves along with a flow of petals into the ether and possibly becomes a star? Well, it's very hard to argue with this sort of thing. So he goes back and begins to try to develop Po, and it just seems hopeless. And then he noticed there is a motivation which turns the non-athletic blob Po into a whirling dervish of energy and athletic ability. What is that? It's food. He will do any sort of athletic maneuver in search of a biscuit. Using this insight, Shifu then trains Po almost like you might train a dog or something, bringing out little kibbles and bits here and there to kind of reward the dog for the accomplishing the task. So at any rate, soon we do see Po looking a little bit formidable. About this time, we are now at one with that earlier passage in which Tai Lung is escaping, and he does escape, and he heads for the Valley of Peace. We see, first of all, the Fierce Five go forth to try to stop him. And they do prove to be fierce, but they are going up against a mighty, mighty martial arts figure, Tai Lung. Shifu decides that he must face his former protege himself, and he goes forth to try to stop Tai Lung. And it appears that maybe he has lost his life in this process. So that leaves the showdown between Po, the Dragon Master, and Tai Lung. So this is the moment, the clash, the final conflict, which we've seen in innumerable movies. And I think that most of the people will probably readily recognize that being a Disney movie, who is going to be the victor. So we do have this interesting denouement. And after the great contest, Po goes over to the apparently dead, prostrate Shifu, and he kind of draws near, and Shifu says, "I'm not dead," or words to the effect. Wishing to maybe express solidarity, Po kind of lays down right next to his master, and they sit there both resting on their backs quietly for a moment or two, and then Po says, "You want to get something to eat?" There's a pause, and Shifu says, "Yeah." Well, that's all. I'll wrap. We're out of time again. This is Top Hat and Buttered Popcorn. My name is John Savers. I'm your host. I do appreciate your tuning in. Hope to see you again at our next Top Hat and Buttered Popcorn.